My parents made me and my sister take turns, being their only daughter, Sophie, every month while the other had to live in the basement and pretend she didn't exist. When I got sick during an off month and started vomiting blood, they gave us 7 days to decide which sister they'd kill with pills, so they could finally have just one daughter. But we tricked them into thinking we'd both been poisoned and escaped while they panicked. My parents said they could only have one daughter, and they meant it. My parents made me and my sister swap identities every month because they said only one daughter deserved to exist at a time, and we had to take turns being the real child while the other became invisible. My parents always said they'd only wanted one daughter. When my sister Scarlett was born 11 months after me, they treated it like a cosmic mistake that needed correcting. They couldn't afford to raise 2 children, they said. But more importantly, they didn't have enough love for 2 daughters. Lucky for them, we looked nearly identical. Same dark hair, same green eyes, same small frame. So they created a system. One month I was their daughter Sophie. The next month I had to pretend I didn't exist while Scarlett became Sophie. The outside world never knew there were 2 of us. The switching ceremony happened at midnight on the 1st of each month. Scarlett and I would stand in the living room while our parents formally transferred their recognition from one daughter to the other. The girl whose turn it was ending had to hand over everything. Her bedroom, her clothes, her name, even her school assignments. Mom would kiss the leaving daughter on the forehead and say, "See you next month, stranger," while Dad removed her from existence entirely. The non-existent daughter moved to the basement with a sleeping bag and was forbidden from appearing anywhere. During Scarlett's months, I had to coach her through phone calls on how to be me, my teachers' names, my friends' birthdays, my class schedule. During my months, she did the same. We shared one school record, one medical file, one life split between 2 girls. Everyone thought Sophie was just moody, never realizing she was actually 2 different people, living as half a person each bonded Scarlett and me in the most twisted way. During my off months in the basement, she'd sneak down after our parents slept and we'd whisper through the darkness. She'd tell me what happened at school as Sophie, which friends asked about me, what homework I'd need to catch up on. I'd coach her through my relationships, telling her exactly what to say to maintain my friendships. We brought whichever one of us was in the basement snacks and contraband books to read during the daylight. Anything to make those hours locked down there alone more bearable. During my month when I got my first period, I had to teach Scarlett how to use tampons through the basement door for when it would be her period next month. When she broke our arm during her month falling off a bike, I had to wear the cast during mine and pretend I remembered the accident. We kept meticulous journals documenting every interaction, every promise made, every lie told. By the time we were 14 and 15, we'd created an entire fictional person named Sophie, who was really 2 broken girls desperately trying to exist. We'd lie in the basement together during switches, holding hands and promising that someday we'd both be real at the same time. But when I was 15, I developed severe stomach pain during an off month that left me writhing on the basement floor. Scarlett begged our parents to take me to the doctor, but they refused. "Sophie can go when it's Sophie's turn," Mom said coldly. By the time my month came, I could barely stand. But at the doctor's office, all the tests came back normal. The pain had mysteriously vanished the moment I became real again. 2 weeks later, during Scarlett's month, the agony returned. I lay in the basement vomiting blood while she sat in school, healthy and terrified. We realized my body only let itself be sick when I didn't exist. The second I became Sophie again, it suppressed everything to survive my month of visibility. That night, Scarlett and I made a decision. We both walked upstairs to our parents' bedroom. "This is calling me," I told them, showing them my bloody clothes. "We need to stop the switching, please." For the first time in years, they actually seemed to listen. Mom's face softened. Dad put down his book. They looked at each other for a long moment. "You're right," Mom finally said. "This has gone on too long. We need to make a permanent decision." Relief flooded through me until I saw Dad's expression. He wasn't agreeing to let us both exist. He was solving a different problem entirely. "We'll keep one daughter," he said calmly. "The other one, well, accidents happen. Especially to sick teenage girls who don't technically exist." Mom nodded, touching my face almost tenderly. "We have a week to decide which Sophie we want to keep. You two can make it easier by telling us who deserves to live." I stumbled backward, but Mom continued in that same gentle voice. "Scarlett is younger, more adaptable, but Sophie has seniority, better grades, but she's weaker. Do we want to deal with a lifetime of these stomach issues?" She pulled a bottle of pills from her nightstand. "These are painless. Whoever we don't choose will simply go to sleep." Dad smiled at our horror. "You wanted a permanent solution. This is permanent. One daughter like we always planned, the other one never existed at all." He looked between us like he was choosing produce at the market. "So help us decide. Who's the real Sophie? Who gets to live?" Scarlett grabbed my hand, and I felt her trembling. After 15 years of sharing one life, we had 7 days to convince our parents we both deserved to exist, or one of us would disappear forever. This time, not to the basement, to the ground. That night, neither of us slept. We sat on my bed, our hands clasped so tightly our knuckles turned white. The bottle of pills Mom had shown us seemed to hover in the air between us, invisible but suffocating. 7 days. We had 7 days to convince 2 people who'd spent 15 years denying one of us existed, that we both deserved to live. The next morning arrived too quickly. I watched Scarlett dress in my clothes, preparing for another day pretending to be me at school. Her hands shook as she buttoned my favorite blue shirt. We'd done this routine hundreds of times, but never with death hanging over our heads. Mom made breakfast like nothing had changed. She hummed while scrambling eggs, setting one plate at the table, just one, like always. Scarlett sat down while I stood in the corner, invisible as required during her month. Dad read his newspaper, occasionally glancing between us with that calculating look I'd seen at the market when he compared prices. After Scarlett left for school, I retreated to the basement. The concrete walls felt colder than usual. I pulled out our shared journal and began writing frantically. Every memory of Scarlett being strong, being smart, being necessary. Every time she'd saved me during her months. Every reason they couldn't take her from me. Hours later, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Not Scarlett's light tread, but Mom's deliberate descent. She rarely came to the basement during off months. My stomach clenched, the familiar pain flaring. She sat on the bottom step, studying me in the dim light. Her fingers drummed against her knee as she examined my hunched posture, the way I pressed my hand against my stomach, making calculations, weighing options. She left without saying a word. When Scarlett came home, she found me curled on the basement floor, sweat beading my forehead. The pain had intensified after Mom's visit, as if my body knew it was being evaluated. Scarlett helped me sit up, wiping my face with her sleeve. That evening, we heard our parents talking in the kitchen, their voices carried through the floorboards. Mom described my condition in clinical detail. Dad responded with questions about Scarlett's academic performance. They discussed us like items on a spreadsheet, comparing assets and liabilities. Scarlett snuck down after they went to bed. She brought soup she'd hidden in her room, feeding me small spoonfuls. We didn't talk about what we'd overheard. Instead, we planned. The next day, Scarlett made mistakes at school, deliberate ones. She failed a pop quiz she could have aced. She forgot my best friend's birthday. She stumbled through a presentation I'd prepared weeks ago. When teachers asked if everything was okay, she just shrugged. Let them think Sophie was falling apart. I spent the day practicing looking healthy. I forced myself to stand straight despite the pain. I did jumping jacks until I collapsed, then did them again. If Mom came down, I wanted her to see strength, not weakness. She didn't come. That night, Scarlett reported her sabotage. Our parents had already received 2 concerned emails from teachers. Dad had frowned at dinner, asking why Sophie's grades were slipping. Mom had noticed Sophie seemed distracted, different. We were both breaking the perfect daughter they'd created. Maybe if neither of us fit their ideal, they'd have to keep us both. Or maybe we were just giving them more reasons to start fresh. On the 3rd day, I heard Dad's footsteps on the basement stairs. He moved differently than Mom, more purposeful, less observant. He carried a clipboard and pen. He asked me questions, not about my health or happiness, but about practical things. How well did I know Scarlett's routines? Could I replicate her handwriting? Did I know her teachers' names from when she attended elementary school in a different district before we moved? I lied, told him I barely knew anything about her life outside our shared Sophie identity, made myself seem incapable of taking over her existence if they chose to keep her instead. His pen scratched against paper with each answer. When he left, I vomited blood into the bucket I kept hidden behind the water heater. The stress was accelerating my condition. My body was betraying me at the worst possible time. Scarlett found me that night barely conscious. She cleaned me up, held me while I shook. We revised our plan. She would start showing signs of the same illness. I wonder what's really going through the parents' minds when they talk about their daughters like items on a shopping list. The way they're comparing grades and health problems like they're picking between 2 cars makes me curious about what kind of people could think this way about their own children. Make them think it was contagious, that keeping either of us meant dealing with a sick child. The 4th morning, Scarlett clutched her stomach at breakfast. Mom's eyes sharpened, watching as she pushed away her eggs. When Scarlett ran to the bathroom, I heard retching sounds. Real or fake, I couldn't tell. Mom followed her. Through the floorboards, I heard concerned murmurs. Scarlett playing up symptoms. Mom asking pointed questions. The bathroom door closing with finality. I spent that day writing letters. One to every friend I'd made, every teacher who'd shown kindness. If I disappeared, I wanted some record that I'd existed, that there had been 2 of us all along. I hid them in the loose brick I'd discovered years ago. Scarlett came down that night looking pale. She'd made herself sick for real, forcing herself to vomit until her throat was raw. Mom had taken her temperature, examined her closely. The performance had been convincing, too convincing. We heard our parents arguing that night. Mom wanted to make the decision immediately. Why wait if both daughters were defective? Dad insisted on the full week. He had spreadsheets to complete, variables to consider. On the 5th day, something changed. Our parents stopped discussing us when they thought we couldn't hear. The house fell silent except for necessary communication. Scarlett went to school. I stayed in the basement. Neither parent visited. The silence was worse than their debates. That night, Scarlett didn't come down immediately after our parents went to bed. I waited, pressing my ear against the door. Finally, I heard her footsteps, but they stopped at the top of the stairs. She whispered through the door that Mom had installed a lock, a padlock on the outside, keeping me in or her out. We pressed our palms against opposite sides of the door, whispering plans through the crack at the bottom. We had 2 days left. The 6th morning, I woke to find a tray of food at the bottom of the stairs. Real food, not the usual scraps. Fresh fruit, warm bread, even juice. A final meal, I realized. They'd made their decision. I didn't eat any of it. Scarlett must have noticed the lock because I heard her arguing with our parents that evening. Her voice rose higher than I'd ever heard it. Mom's responses stayed eerily calm. Dad's silence spoke volumes. I spent that day preparing, not for death, but for what Scarlett and I had whispered through the door. Our last desperate plan. Everything depended on tomorrow night. The 7th day dawned gray and cold. I felt it in my bones, even in the windowless basement. Today, our parents would announce their decision. Today, one of us was supposed to die. I heard Scarlett leave for school as usual. Our parents moved around upstairs, their footsteps creating a rhythm I'd memorized over 15 years. Mom in the kitchen, Dad in his study. The ordinary sounds of a family that had never been ordinary. At noon, I heard car doors slam, both of them leaving together. Unusual for a weekday. Were they making final preparations, buying supplies for whatever came next? I tested the basement door, still locked, but Scarlett and I had prepared for this. I reached under the old water heater where I'd hidden the screwdriver Scarlett had smuggled down months ago. My hands trembled as I worked on the door hinges from the inside. Each screw took forever to remove, my weakened fingers struggling with the rust. The metal scraped and protested, but finally the last screw came free. I pushed the door open carefully, hinges groaning. The hallway stretched before me, forbidden territory during Scarlett's month. My legs shook as I climbed the stairs, each step an act of rebellion against 15 years of rules. The house felt different in daylight. I'd only seen it at night during off months, sneaking to the bathroom when desperate. Now sunlight streamed through windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air. Everything looked sharper, more real. I found what I needed in Dad's study. His laptop sat open on the desk, still logged in. My fingers flew across the keyboard, accessing his files. Spreadsheets filled the screen, not just about us, but about everything. Finances, insurance policies. One file made my blood run cold. Life insurance, 2 policies, both in the name Sophie. One purchased 15 years ago, one purchased last week. The beneficiaries were our parents. The payout was substantial. I photographed everything with the old digital camera Scarlett had hidden in the basement ceiling tiles. Then I searched deeper. Medical records, school documents, everything that proved 2 daughters existed, not one. Mom's car pulled into the driveway. I ran, my bare feet slapping against hardwood. I made it to the basement just as the front door opened. I pulled the door closed, holding it in place since the hinges were gone. My heart hammered as I heard Mom's heels click across the floor above. She came straight to the basement. The doorknob turned. I held my breath, pressing my weight against the door. She pushed harder. The door shifted slightly. Then her phone rang. She answered it, her voice muffled through the door. After a moment, her footsteps retreated. I heard her car start again and drive away. I spent the rest of the afternoon preparing. I wrote everything down, made copies of the photos. I hid evidence in multiple places throughout the basement. If something happened to me, Scarlett would find it. When Scarlett came home from school, she went straight to her room as instructed. I heard her moving around, following our plan. She was packing, but making it look like she wasn't, taking things that wouldn't be missed, preparing for what came next. Our parents returned together that evening. They called Scarlett to the living room. I pressed my ear to the basement door, straining to hear. Mom's voice carried down, explaining they'd made their decision. They would announce it tomorrow, on the actual 7th day. Tonight was for last preparations. I heard Scarlett go back upstairs. Then footsteps approached the basement door. Dad's heavy tread. He tested the lock, rattling it. Satisfied, he walked away. Hours passed. The house settled into sleep. I waited, counting minutes. At exactly 2 a.m., I heard Scarlett's signal. 3 taps on the heating vent that connected her room to the basement. I responded with 3 taps of my own. Then I got to work. The loose brick came free easily after years of practice. But instead of hiding something, I retrieved what I'd placed there earlier. The bottle of pills from Mom's nightstand. I'd taken them during my escape to Dad's study. I crushed 2 pills into powder, then carefully returned the bottle to its hiding spot. The powder went into a small envelope I'd made from notebook paper. This was our insurance policy. The next morning, I heard Scarlett getting ready for school, but then Mom's voice, telling her to stay home. Today was too important for school. My stomach dropped. We hadn't planned for this. I heard them all in the kitchen. Breakfast sounds, normal family noises that weren't normal at all. Then footsteps approaching the basement. Multiple sets. The door opened. All 3 of them stood there. Mom held a tray with breakfast. Real breakfast. Eggs, bacon, toast. Dad carried 2 chairs. Scarlett's face was pale but determined. They set up the chairs in the basement. Mom placed the tray on a box between them. Then she and Dad sat down, looking at us expectantly. Mom explained their decision process, how they'd weighed every factor, how they'd considered our futures, how they'd thought about what was best for everyone. Her voice stayed calm, reasonable, like she was explaining a vacation plan, not a murder. Dad pulled out his clipboard. He read statistics about single children versus siblings, success rates, happiness indexes, cost analyses, all supporting their choice to keep just one. I watched Scarlett's face as they talked. She kept her expression neutral, but I saw her hand slip into her pocket. The envelope. She had it. Mom stood up, smoothing her skirt. She announced they'd chosen to keep Scarlett. I was older, sicker, more damaged by years of basement living. Scarlett had more potential, more years ahead. It was the logical choice. She pulled out the med bottle. My heart raced, but I kept my face blank. She poured a glass of water from a pitcher she'd brought. Then she held both out to me. I looked at the pills, then at Scarlett. She gave the tiniest nod. I reached for the bottle, but then Scarlett stood up. She snatched the water glass from Mom's hand and drank it all in one gulp. Mom frowned, started to speak. Scarlett grabbed the pitcher and poured another glass. She drank that too. Mom's annoyance turned to confusion. She demanded to know what Scarlett was doing. Scarlett just smiled and poured another glass. This time she held it out to me. I understood. I took the glass and drank deeply. The water tasted normal. Scarlett poured another. We passed it between us, drinking glass after glass. Mom and Dad exchanged looks. Then Scarlett did something unexpected. She took the med bottle from Mom's hand. Before anyone could react, she opened it and poured pills into her palm. She pretended to count them, then frowned. She showed the bottle to our parents, asked why there were only 18 pills when there should be 20. Mom snatched the bottle back, counted for herself. 2 pills were missing. Scarlett pulled the envelope from her pocket. She opened it slowly, showing the white powder inside. Then she looked at the empty water pitcher, at the glasses we'd been drinking from. Our parents went very still. Scarlett explained she'd found the powder in the water pitcher that morning. She'd assumed it was sugar or something harmless. But now, seeing the missing pills, she wasn't sure. We'd both hammered so much water. If those were the missing pills. Mom's face went white. She grabbed the med bottle, reading the label. Something about Mom grabbing that med bottle and reading the label seems oddly telling. She knows exactly what those pills do, but I'm curious why she needs to check the label now. Dad stood up so fast his chair fell over. They both looked at us, then at each other. I started swaying, just a little at first, then more dramatically. Scarlett caught me as I pretended to stumble. She was swaying too now. We held each other up, 2 sisters poisoned by our parents' own weapon. Mom screamed at us to throw up, to get it out of our systems. Dad ran upstairs, presumably to call 911, but Scarlett held up her hand. She explained there was another option. We could all pretend this never happened. We walk out of this house, both of us, alive and free. Or they could explain to the paramedics why their daughters were poisoned with pills from Mom's nightstand. Pills prescribed to Mom. Pills that would show up in a toxicology report. I let myself slide to the floor, still conscious but playing up the effects. Scarlett knelt beside me, then looked at our parents. She asked them what mattered more, their perfect single-daughter plan, or avoiding prison for attempted murder. Mom was crying now, real tears. She begged us to tell her we hadn't really hammered the powder, that this was a trick. Scarlett just stared at her, swaying slightly. Dad came back downstairs, phone in hand. He hadn't called anyone yet. He looked between his wife and his daughters. His face showed the calculations, the risk assessment, the cost-benefit analysis of letting us die versus letting us go. Scarlett made it simple for him. She pulled out the digital camera. She showed them the screen, the insurance policies, the spreadsheets, the evidence that 2 daughters existed. She explained she'd already uploaded everything to a cloud account. If we died, the police would receive an anonymous tip about where to look. But if we lived, if we left, the evidence would stay hidden. We'd disappear. They'd never have to see us again. They could tell people their daughter ran away. They could play the grieving parents. They could start over. I watched our parents crumble. 15 years of control, shattered by 2 desperate girls and their own pills. Mom sank into the chair, sobbing. Dad stood frozen, phone still in hand. Scarlett helped me stand. We climbed the basement stairs together, leaving our parents in the dark where they'd kept us for so long. In my room, we grabbed the bag Scarlett had packed, money she'd stolen from Mom's purse over months, clothes that would fit us both, our shared journal, the camera, everything that mattered. We walked through the house one last time, past the living room where we'd switched places monthly, past the kitchen where only 1 plate ever sat at the table, past our parents' bedroom where they'd made their monstrous decision. Mom and Dad didn't try to stop us. They sat in the basement staring at nothing. The med bottle lay on the floor between them, evidence of their choice, proof of what they'd become. At the front door, Scarlett turned back. She called down to them that the powder in the pitcher had been flour. We hadn't hammered any pills. We were fine, but they should remember this feeling, this terror. This was how we'd lived for 15 years. We walked out into the afternoon sun, 2 girls who'd shared one life, finally free to be ourselves. We had no plan beyond escape, no No money beyond what Scarlett had stolen. No identity beyond the shared one we'd created. But we had each other, and for the first time in our lives, that was enough. We made it 3 blocks before the adrenaline wore off. I collapsed on a bus bench, the familiar pain flaring in my stomach. But this time, Scarlett was there in daylight. She held me as I shook, rubbed my back as I fought nausea. A woman walking her dog stopped to ask if we needed help. For 15 years, no one had seen us together. No one had known to help. Now this stranger offered water from her bottle, asked if she should call someone. Scarlett thanked her but said we were fine. We were just sisters, dealing with a family situation. The woman nodded knowingly and walked on. Sisters. We were sisters in public, in daylight, acknowledged and real. We took the bus downtown. Scarlett had researched shelters, places that helped teenagers. She'd memorized addresses during her school months, preparing for this possibility. We found one that didn't ask too many questions, that understood sometimes home wasn't safe. The intake worker looked at our matching faces, our shared features. She asked if we were twins. We said yes, and it felt like the first truth we'd told in years. She didn't question why we only had one ID between us, why our stories were vague. She'd seen enough to know when not to push. That night, we lay in separate beds for the first time in our lives. The shelter room was small, basic, but it was ours. No basement, no switching, no pretending one of us didn't exist. I thought about our parents, alone in their perfect house with their perfect plan destroyed. They'd wanted one daughter and ended up with none. The irony wasn't lost on me. Scarlett whispered across the gap between our beds. She asked if I regretted leaving, if I thought we should have handled it differently. I told her no. We'd survived 15 years of being erased. We'd earned our freedom. The next few days blurred together. The shelter helped us figure out next steps. Legal aid, documentation, how to prove we both existed when only one of us was ever recorded. It would be a long process, they warned. Complicated, but possible. I had to see a doctor about my stomach. The years of suppressing illness had done damage, but it was treatable, the doctor said. Now that I could exist full-time, my body could finally heal properly. No more hiding pain. No more waiting for my turn to be real. Scarlett started the process of getting her own identity documents. Birth certificate first, then everything else. The legal aid lawyer said our case was unusual but not unprecedented. Hidden children, erased identities. It happened more than people knew. We gave the lawyer the evidence we'd collected. The photos of Dad's spreadsheets, the insurance policies, our journal documenting 15 years of switches. She said it was enough to build a case if we wanted to pursue it. We said we'd think about it. A week into our stay at the shelter, Scarlett's phone rang. Mom's number. We'd kept the phone, knowing they might try to contact us. Scarlett put it on speaker. Mom's voice was different, smaller. She asked if we were okay, if we were safe. She said they'd been to the police, reported us as runaways, but they hadn't mentioned the pills, hadn't mentioned there were 2 of us, just said their daughter Sophie had left home. She wanted to meet, to talk, to work something out. Dad had ideas, she said, ways to make this work, ways to fix things. Her voice cracked when she said she missed us, both of us. Scarlett looked at me. I shook my head. We'd spent 15 years believing their lies, accepting their twisted love. We wouldn't go back to being half people. Not for them, not for anyone. Scarlett told Mom we were never coming back. We were building our own lives now. Separate lives, real lives. If they wanted to help, they could start by admitting to authorities that they had 2 daughters. They could correct 15 years of lies. Mom started crying. She said we didn't understand. It had been so hard. The financial pressure, the emotional strain. They'd done their best with an impossible situation. They'd never meant for it to go so far. I took the phone from Scarlett. I told Mom that their best had nearly culled me, that their love had been conditional, fractional, deadly, that they'd had choices, and they'd chosen cruelty. Now we were choosing ourselves. I hung up before she could respond. That night, I dreamed about the basement, but in the dream, the door was open. Light poured in. Scarlett and I walked out together, hand in hand. Behind us, the basement filled with water until it was just a reflection of the sky. The phone call changed everything. 2 days later, Dad showed up at the shelter alone. The receptionist called us down, and we found him sitting in the lobby, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. His usual calculating expression had been replaced by something hollow. He explained that Mom had taken the pills herself the night after we left. Not to die, he insisted, but to understand what we'd gone through. She'd miscalculated the dose. The hospital pumped her stomach, but the damage was done. Her liver was failing. She needed us to come see her. Scarlett and I exchanged glances. This could be another manipulation, another trap, but the receptionist confirmed she'd called the hospital. Mom was really there, really sick. We agreed to go, but only together, and only for an hour. The hospital smelled like disinfectant and despair. Mom lay propped against pillows, her skin yellowed from liver damage. When she saw us together, actually together in public, tears leaked from her eyes. She reached out weakly, then let her hand drop. She whispered apologies through cracked lips, not the calculated kind we'd heard before, but raw, broken words. She explained how it had started. Postpartum psychosis after Scarlett's birth. Dad's solution to hide one child rather than get her help. By the time she recovered, the pattern was set. The lie had grown too big to undo. Dad stood by the window, not looking at us. He added details Mom was too weak to share. The financial strain of keeping the secret, bribing a doctor to falsify records, moving whenever questions arose. The insurance policies were meant as college funds, he claimed, in case something happened to them. We didn't believe him, but it didn't matter anymore. Mom's breathing grew labored. She begged us to forgive her, to understand. We couldn't give her that. 15 years of erasure couldn't be forgiven in an hour, but Scarlett took her hand anyway. I stood back, my stomach churning with familiar pain. The nurse came in to give Mom medication. As we turned to leave, Mom called out weakly. The timing of Mom taking those pills herself feels way too convenient, like she knew exactly what story would bring them back to her bedside. This whole hospital scene with the tearful confessions and Dad's sudden willingness to explain everything makes me wonder if they planned this final performance together. She'd written something, she said, a confession. Everything about what they'd done. It was with her lawyer. If we wanted it, if we needed it for our documentation, it was ours. We left without promising anything. Back at the shelter, we processed what had happened. Mom's confession could fast-track our legal existence, but using it meant engaging with our past, with them. The lawyer advised us to take it. Practical trumped emotional, she said. 3 days later, Mom died. Dad called the shelter, his voice flat. The funeral would be small, family only. We were welcome if we wanted to come. If not, he understood. He'd be moving after everything was settled. Somewhere new, somewhere without memories. We didn't go to the funeral. Instead, we met with Mom's lawyer. The confession was more detailed than we'd expected. Names, dates, every switch documented. How they'd fooled the school system, the medical fraud, everything we needed to prove we were two people, not one. The lawyer also revealed something unexpected. Mom had changed her will in the hospital. Everything went to us, split equally. The house, savings, even those insurance policies. Dad had agreed to it. Blood money maybe, but money we desperately needed. We met Dad one last time to sign papers. He looked older, grayer. He handed over keys, documents, our birth certificates. Scarlett's hidden all these years. He spoke only when necessary, his voice mechanical. Before leaving, he paused at the door. He told us he was sorry, not for what they'd done. He still believed they'd tried their best with an impossible situation, but sorry we'd suffered. Sorry we'd had to save ourselves. Then he left, and we never saw him again. The house felt different without them. Scarlett and I walked through rooms that had been forbidden during our off months. We found evidence everywhere. 2 toothbrushes in the bathroom cabinet, 2 sets of baby clothes in the attic. They'd kept everything, just hidden it. In Mom's closet, we discovered photo albums, pictures of us as babies, labeled Sophie 1 and Sophie 2, before they'd committed to the switching. Videos on an old camcorder showed Mom holding us both, looking overwhelmed but normal. Before the break, before the system, we couldn't live there. Too many ghosts. But selling the house would take time, and we needed stability for the legal process, so we compromised. We lived there temporarily, but changed everything. Painted walls, moved furniture, made it ours. The documentation process moved faster with Mom's confession. Birth certificates were reissued, social security numbers assigned, school records separated. Each form filed felt like recovering a piece of ourselves. Scarlett chose to keep her name. I considered changing mine, but decided Sophie was mine as much as theirs. My health improved slowly. Without the stress of switching, my stomach began healing. The doctor explained it was psychosomatic, my body's response to extreme stress. Regular treatment helped, but I'd always carry the damage, physical proof of what survival had cost. Scarlett enrolled in school properly. Her own records, her own name. She was behind academically from all the missed months, but she caught up quickly. Teachers who'd known Sophie were confused by the sudden changes, but the principal, informed of our situation, kept questions at bay. I took online classes to finish high school. Being in a classroom felt too exposed after years of hiding, but I excelled at independent study. All those basement hours reading contraband books had prepared me for self-directed learning. We sold the house after 6 months. A young couple bought it, excited about the basement's potential as a game room. We didn't tell them about the scratches on the doorframe where we'd marked our height during off months. Some histories didn't need preserving. With the house money and Mom's savings, we rented a small apartment near the university. 2 bedrooms, 2 names on the lease. Every piece of paper with both our names felt like a victory. Proof we both existed, simultaneously, legally. The insurance policies paid out eventually. We donated half to the shelter that had helped us. The rest went into savings for college. Blood money transformed into future possibilities. A year after leaving, we got a letter forwarded from Dad's lawyer. Dad had settled somewhere in Maine, working at a hardware store. He included no return address, just wanted us to know he was alive. He ended with, "I think of you both every day." We didn't respond. Scarlett started dating someone from her study group. She was nervous about explaining our past, but he listened without judgment. When he came for dinner, he brought 2 desserts, 1 for each of us. Such a small gesture, but it made Scarlett cry. Recognition, normalcy. I struggled more with relationships. Trust came hard when your parents had tried to erase you. But I found solace in art therapy, painting what I couldn't say. Abstract pieces full of basements and shadows, but also light breaking through. The therapist said trauma could become transformation. I was skeptical but kept painting. 2 years later, Scarlett graduated high school properly. I attended the ceremony, cheering from the audience. Her diploma had her name only. No shared identity. No switching required. Just Scarlett, walking across the stage as herself. I'd finished my GED and started community college. Psychology major. I wanted to understand what had broken in our parents. Not to forgive, but to recognize the signs. To help other hidden children. They existed more than people knew. We kept our shared journal but added separate ones. Individual thoughts, individual dreams. The shared one became a historical document. Proof of our survival. Sometimes we read entries aloud, marveling at how we'd endured. 3 years after leaving, we received word that Dad had died. Heart attack at work. His landlord found our contact information among his things. He'd lived alone, spoke to no one about family, but his apartment was full of our photos, school pictures he'd somehow obtained, newspaper clipping of Scarlett's honor roll mention. He'd been watching from afar. We handled his arrangements because no one else would. A simple burial next to Mom. Whatever they'd become, they'd created us. We couldn't forgive, but we could offer this final dignity. At the grave, Scarlett left the bottle of pills that had saved us. I left a photo, the last one of all 4 of us together, before the switching began. Time helped, though it didn't heal everything. My stomach would always be sensitive. Scarlett still checked locks obsessively. We both struggled with birthdays, unsure which ones really counted, but we built lives, real ones, separate but connected. 5 years after leaving, I graduated with my psychology degree. Scarlett was in nursing school. We'd moved to a bigger apartment, each decorating our own space. Mine was minimalist, craving the light denied in basements. Hers was cozy, filled with proof of existence, photos, certificates, anything with her name. We hosted dinner parties now, friends who knew our story and some who didn't. We'd learned to summarize it simply. We were raised in an unusual situation. Most people didn't push. Those who did heard what they could handle. The switching anniversary still hit hard each month. We'd spend those midnights together, usually watching movies or playing cards, reclaiming the time that had been stolen, making new memories to overlay the old. 7 years later, Scarlett got married. I was her maid of honor. When the officiant asked who gave her away, we'd arranged for him to say, "She gives herself." Because she did. We both did. No one owned us anymore. I published research on hidden children, academic work, not memoir. Our story was ours to keep or share as we chose. But the research helped change how social services looked for signs, how teachers recognized inconsistencies. Small changes, but meaningful. 10 years after leaving, we stood in that hospital again. Different wing, different reason. Scarlett was having her first child. As I held my nephew, I promised him he'd never doubt his existence, never share his name, never disappear. He'd be whole from the start. We were Sophie and Scarlett, 2 sisters who'd shared one life and survived, who'd chosen existence over erasure, who'd saved each other when no one else would. We were real. We were separate. We were together. We were free. Appreciate you sticking with me while I tried to make sense of all this. A lot of questions, not a ton of answers, but honestly, that's kind of the fun of it. Take care, and I'll see you when the next one gets weird.